asking just for a very straight answer about the timeline of the Occupied Territories Bill and the advice of the Attorney-General. I know that my Labour Party colleague and spokesperson in Foreign Affairs, Deputy Duncan Smith, asked the Taoiseach would we get an answer in October, and they said no, that it's going to be probably by November. I know from talking to Senator Frances Black that there was going to be a meeting scheduled for, there was a meeting scheduled for last week, but because of the motion of confidence that it was moved from that date, but she hasn't been given a proper date. And I know that, you know, there's many members of this House have raised it, and Taoiseach that was here last Thursday. I suppose we just want to know, like, it was agreed in the Foreign Affairs Committee that to include the services in the passing of this bill. And could we please get an answer what aspects of the services are believed not to be implementable? I know that the Foreign Affairs Committee met with international lawyers and who were able to outline a clear pathway for the inclusion of services. And there was a strong argument that the inclusion of services, you know, that we shouldn't be worried about it, that the inclusion of services should be part of this. And if it doesn't work out like that, that we can change it. You know, we can change to exclude services again. That can be, in my understanding, that's very easily done. You know, I acknowledge that we're waiting for the advice of the Attorney-General. But by not including services, though, are we not being compliant with the ruling of the International Court of Justice, or not being compliant with the International Court of Justice? So we've always stood, I mean, we know, you know this yourself, Deputy Collins, that we've all stood beside the side of justice, and the majority of the people in Ireland want to see this bill passed as soon as possible, but they want to see the inclusion of services in it. So, you know, I suppose what's the point of having witnesses coming before a Foreign Affairs Committee, which has deliberated for a very significant amount of time? What's the point of having like joint Oireachtas committees if the advice is not going to be adhered to from the recommendations from it? We know that Spain has banned the import of goods and the advertisement of services. So we could, as a country, you know, I know that as a country we want to go further than this, and we pride ourselves, and in fairness, like, credit where credit is due, that we have been leading out on Palestine, and we have been leading out as a country. You know, and even the fact that this drafting of this bill in the first place, and huge credit has to be given to Senator Black for this, but it's just going on too long now. And I suppose the election promises, this was very much part of the election, that this would be, you know, that this bill was going to be enacted. But I suppose, you know, it's crucial as well that, you know, the International Court of Justice has made a ruling, and how can Israel just get away with genocide in front of our eyes when the International Court of Justice has made a ruling on it? So how is this going to stand for humanity? I'm not going to give you a big lecture about it, but I suppose because we all know where we stand in it, but we just need to get a clear answer. When is the ruling from the Attorney-General going to? When are we waiting for the advice of the Attorney-General? And what is stopping the services being included? I know that the argument is it's going to affect trade with because of the ban, the boycotting and divestment rule in America. It's going to affect trade with Irish. The argument all the time is going to affect the trade with Irish companies. But we shouldn't be trading with illegal settlements anyway. So I think we just need to get a clear answer on it. And I suppose thank you for coming in to address this.
Minister.
Thanks, Senator. So firstly, the government's position, and indeed that of the European Union, is clear that settlements are illegal under international law and undermine the realisation of the two-state solution. This is the long-standing position of Ireland, the European Union and many other international partners. In June of 2025, the government approved the general scheme of the Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory Prohibition of Importation of Goods Bill. The main purpose of the bill, as set out in the general scheme, is to prohibit the importation of goods into the state from Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. This is in line with the programme for government, which commits to prohibiting importation of goods, and it's also the priority piece of legislation for this term published by the government under the Department and the section for the Department of Foreign Affairs. On the specific issue of services, the Taoiseach has said that he has no policy issue in relation to the inclusion of services. Trade in services is considerably more complex, I think you'd appreciate that, than is the case with goods, and there remains considerable legal uncertainty as to whether their inclusion is permissible under EU law. So legal clarity is needed on whether or not it is possible to include services, and the Taoiseach has asked the Attorney-General to advise on this, as you're aware. We've also have to take into account of the practical issues with regards to the implementation, should the services be included in the scope of the bill. On the timeline, over the summer, the Joint Committee on Foreign Affairs and Trade, which you referred to, held a number of hearings on the general scheme and received submissions representing a range of views and perspectives. The Joint Committee then published its report on the bill. Work to analyse the report and its recommendations is well underway. The regulatory impact assessment is also currently being finalised by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and will be available on the Department's website quite shortly when it is completed. The next steps in the process, including the timeline for the progress of the bill, will be considered by the Government shortly. The Taoiseach expects to engage further with Government colleagues and the Attorney-General on these issues in the coming weeks. In addition, we continue to engage with the European Union and international levels with like-minded partners on the issue. In the absence of action at the EU level, Ireland has welcomed the announcements by the Dutch, Spanish, Slovenian and Belgian governments regarding their own intention to ban the importation of goods produced in illegal Israeli settlements. It remains the Government's preference that collective action would be taken at EU level, and Ireland continues to pursue this. In light of recent developments, the EU's immediate focus is on ensuring the success of the ceasefire and the peace deal. It is essential that peace is given a chance to succeed. At the Foreign Affairs Council in Luxembourg on Monday, the Taoiseach met his EU counterparts and welcomed the ceasefire and release of hostages, as well as calling for the EU to support efforts to flood Gaza with urgently needed humanitarian aid, preserving the very fragile ceasefire and ensuring humanitarian access at scale is a priority. So the Taoiseach also recalled the unacceptable nature of what has been happening in the West Bank and stressed the importance of ensuring that the concept of a two-state solution resulting in a viable, contiguous Palestinian state in the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem remains the front and centre of the EU's approach, and that all future phases of the current agreement are conducive to its implementation.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator?
Thank you very much, Minister. So we don't really have a response yet. We don't have a timeline. And I think the danger is that because of the general election, or because of the presidential election, and then we're going to be coming up to Christmas, that it's going to be kicked down the road again. And you know, like you said there, that it is a very fragile ceasefire, but surely the ceasefire would be kept in place if Israel knew that there would be some sanctions or some kind of, you know, that there would be, that they just can't get away with this. And just a reminder, I suppose, since the 7th, this was figures out just this week, since the 7th of October 2023, with the Israeli aggression on Palestine, 69,215 people have been killed, 179,237 have been injured, 18,700 Palestinians have been detained, and 1.9 million people have been displaced. And Israel is still getting away with it. So it's disappointing that there isn't a clear timeline and that we can't just get a straight answer. Thank you.
Senator, Minister.
I don't agree with you, Senator, that it's been kicked down the road. It is a very significant priority for government. It's a priority for me as a member of government and for my party also. I've been to the West Bank and I've been to the settlements. I've seen the proliferation of Israeli settlements across the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, and it's beyond comprehension. I've been a supporter of the Occupied Territories Bill since it was first introduced into these houses by Senator Francis Black. I co-sponsored it in Dáil Éireann when we were in opposition. We've come from a position where it was deemed that we couldn't progress that piece of legislation to where it is now the priority. It's a government priority. It's in the programme for government. And I think when it is passed, regardless of whether services are in it or not, and I'm not going to die in the ditch in relation to the services piece. I think actually too much of a big deal has been made out of that element of it. It will be a powerful, powerful international statement by Ireland when we pass this piece of legislation. Have no doubt about that. And I think, to be fair, when you produce legislation, it has to be robust and it has to be able to stand up to scrutiny. And there's no point in producing cack-handed legislation that won't stand up to a challenge or to a scrutiny. And have no doubt about it, it will be challenged. It's absolutely going to be challenged. So the Attorney-General is right. And I appreciate your concern and everybody's shared concern in wanting to see this legislation progress. But it's not the case that government is dragging its heels in relation to this. The opposite is the case. It's a priority for all of us. We want to do it, and we want to do it right, and we don't want it to rebound and to fail at the very, very first test. So I think it's reasonable that the Attorney General and the Department of Foreign Affairs should be allowed to bottom out the piece about the services element of it. But certainly banning the importation of goods in the first instance will be a huge, huge, huge first step. And if we don't get services in the first draft of the bill, well, then it can also be, like any piece of legislation, it can be revisited. Whether or not it will be included in the first instance, I can't say at this point in time. I'd like to see it in there, but if it's in there, it has to be able to be
Minister,
airtight.
You're well over time.